All right. Yeah. Fresh crack today. Highland Park 15-year-old Viking Heart Island single malt Scotch whiskey. This is a Edrington product from the Highland Park Distillery on Orkney. And this is 44% ABV or 88 proof. Um, it is chill filtered as far as I know, but it is natural color. And they actually, but they use weird wording. Normally you see natural color on the bottle somewhere. They actually just say no color added back here in very small text. But we can be confident there is no color added here. And this is 15 years in a mix of ex-sherry with Spanish oak and ex-sherry with American oak. So it's all sherry oak, but it's either seasoned Spanish oak or seasoned American oak or European oak instead of Spanish oak, whatever you want to call it, European and American oak. And again, roughly 20% of the barley in these offerings is peated. And it is peated using barley from peat. The barley is peated using peat from Orkney, which is different than the peat from Isla or the mainlands, where it has a larger concentration of heather. Heather is a main component in the peat from Orkney, so there's more of a floral characteristic in the peated malts from Orkney as compared to peated malts in the Highlands or on Isla, for example. Like the Isla peat, for example, has much more on the decomposed wood rather than like floral characteristics. So that makes the peated offerings from Highland Park a little bit unique because they're using peat that really nobody else uses. It's about 20 ppm, so it's not like super turbo peated. That being said, they do have some offerings that are heavily peated with their unique peat brand. I would love to try some of those, but there are not very many of them. And of course, this bottle here is a ceramic. As I'm sure you've noticed, there's no box and it is in a ceramic bottle. We cannot see through it and we do not know the color at this point. I can't tell you the bottle coloration, just that it is ceramic. It also is like kind of like Schrodinger's whiskey because you never know how empty it is. It's always full until it's not. So we'll give this a shot here. And of course, Edrington is the same company that owns Macallan. So we talk a lot about Diageo and Pinot Ricard. We don't actually hear that much from other Public Enemy #1 Macallan, but this is a Macallan brand at the end of the day. Nothing wrong with Macallan. I'm just saying, you know, it's maybe a little expensive for what you get. And that's most people's consensus. So we just wish it was cheaper. It's good, just cheaper. All right. Nice wooden chonker cork here. Good pop. Lovely cork, actually. Nice. Nice and thick. Smells like sherry. Pours like, comes out. I didn't think about that for a second, but when you pour bottles somewhat, you can see the liquid in the glass coming out, so you know like how to adjust your pour. This came out so quick, and I was like, man, this is pouring really quick. But I just realized it's because I can't see in the bottle, so I can't like adjust the pour speed. So we did a good pour anyway. It's fine, but it came out a little quicker than I was expecting. All right. So again, it's a 44% alcohol, so it's not quite 46. We're not quite at 46, but we're getting closer. We're inching closer. That being said, it is 15 years of age, so there's, 3 more years on there. And if we have time, if we're so inclined, we could get out the 12, have the 12 year, and see how it feels by comparison. This is natural color. Again, this is 100% 100% sherry oak, um, but it's got some American sherry oak, if you will. Um, that being said, the color is kind of a little different to me, and maybe it's not obvious on the camera. Um, but it's kind of like a little off bourbon. If I don't know how to describe it, but it's like it's darker in color. But you know when bourbon kind of goes towards like a rich mahogany brown or like a slightly reddish hue. This is one. This one's kind of going in a slightly almost beige-ish, like dark beige direction. Like what's a good word? Like a dark tan almost in person. It's the coloration is a little different. Um, it's darker than like your typical straw color, but it didn't like go darker in like the bourbon dark direction. It went in kind of like this beige-ish kind of direction, which is interesting, to say the least. And maybe it's just the way I'm looking at it today in this light or something, or maybe it's the ceramic bottle. But the color is like a little. It seems a little different. You know, it seemed. You know, maybe there's something to that American sherry oak. Slightly a little different. I think the best way to do, and we might do this another time, not today, but maybe get out like a really deep bourbon and like put it beside this and might make it really obvious, kind of the coloration I'm talking about. All right. You're back. Welcome back. It's kind of different. This one feels more on the sherry characteristics than the 12, which I guess would make sense. It's spent more in sherry. Um, that being said, the nose is not that expressive for me. The notes that are immediately coming for me are like a little bit of a floral note, a little bit of like a baking spice note, and kind of like a toasty note. Um, like dried fruits that were toasted. I don't know how that makes any sense, but it's kind of toasty. It feels like toasted grains with like a floral characteristic and kind of a dried fruit characteristic. It's kind of weird. A little bit different. That being said, the nose is not the most expressive for me. It's not like hitting super hard. I do feel like I'm having to hunt a little bit more than I want to. But you can tell that it's sherried, and you can tell there's a little bit of like a floral characteristic to it. And it feels like a toasted malt. Um, I'm also getting like dried citrus fruits. Yeah, like dried citrus fruits. Yeah, I like that note. I like that note, dried citrus fruit. Like it's not full on lemon, orange. It's like, um, and not like zesty, like lemon zest. It's like dried out citrus, like a slice of lemon that was left to dry out. Yeah, like toasted malts, a slight floral characteristic, a little bit of dried fruit, dried citrus. It's kind of like where we're sitting. Something like that. But it's also not the most expressive for me. Probably like the toasty characteristic and the dried citrus characteristic are what are most obvious for me. Um, the overall presentation, I almost want to say, almost feels like potpourri. I think that's a good descriptor. It's like, again, you get that little bit of floral character, a little bit of dried fruits, dried citrus, kind of like this amalgamation of different, we'll say, typically non-edible scents. Yeah, potpourri, I think, is a good word too. All right, so here we go. Highland Park, 15-year-old Highland single malt Scotch whiskey from Orkney, on the palate. Slancheva. Some nice flavor on the palate. That unique peat character is in there. Um, it's like immediately when you get it on the tongue, you can tell it's peated, but it's not the same peated. It's like a little different in the peat. It doesn't have that deep, dark, earthy, bitter note. It doesn't have that like creosote character on the back foot. Smoky character, I'll fight very low or maybe even non-existent. We'll try to hunt for maybe some smoke, campfire smoke. Um, but you can tell the peat character from its like slightly vegetal nature, slightly floral nature on the palate. A very soft, approachable peated character. Not smoky like barbecue and not like briny like sea spray. It's a floral peat. It's a soft, approachable peat. Um, and that's kind of accompanied with some like nice sweetnesses, a little bit of that kind of sherry related sweetness. The finish didn't strike me as super long, but we're gonna like kind of hit it a few more times and get some deeper analysis there. Oh yeah, it's definitely like a potpourri. My dog is floating. It's being possessed, brother. You gotta relax on the fucking Flintstone vitamins, okay? Yeah, the nose is still a little tame for me though. I don't really get smoke on the aroma. It's just floral sweetnesses, that little bit citrus thing, that sherry-related dried fruit thing. It's a nice nose, but the flavor, the aromas aren't super strong. It's unique though. I think that's something we can always say. I think from my experiences with Highland Park is it's a very unique distillate. Um, Again, no one's using this kind of peat with their distillate, so it hits. And somehow the sherry, the fact that these are all sherry cask matured, it doesn't like hit out like a sherry bomb. It's a complementary element with its unique peated character. I almost splashed my nose. It works very well as an integration. Those like sherry notes are not overbearing. That being said, I don't know how much of this is like first fill. Maybe most of these are like refill. Maybe they reuse refill sherry casks a lot, so it's not super hard on the sherry. Maybe only some of them are fresh. I'm not sure. I just do know that the sherry is not overbearing and it leaves plenty of room for the unique distillery character to have some impact. Now, one of the characters about the 12 year that hit me early on in my career was a fruitcake. Um, on the palate. So, I'm going to see if I can get the same fruitcake off of this. Um, but it wasn't obviously the case earlier. There is some nice toasted grain, but it's not coming across like cakey to me. It was very approachable. The sweetness, like sherry related sweetness, that kind of like slight, kind of like dark toffee sweetness, slight spiciness. Um, but it's not like giving me like that fruitcake note that I experience with the 12 sometimes. Um, Again, finish could be a little longer. It's not bad. Again, the palate is mostly that kind of like very soft, unique floral peat with that kind of like underlining of sherry related sweetness. Um, you do get like maybe a slight bit of that kind of like toasty malt character in there. Um, Not really very smoky. Not really getting like no campfire smoke kind of note, no bonfire, no like seaside characteristics for me. Um, you can get that there is a vegetal component that the peat is very present with like this vegetal floral component, but it's not earthy, bitter, sludgy, creosote. None of these things. It's very approachable to drink. Um, The spice is very complimentary. It doesn't like spike in any kind of way. Um, that sweetness is kind of maybe leading into like a honey, kind of like what a Highland sweetness kind of tastes and smells like. Yeah, kind of like drifting into honey there. Brother, what are you doing? Your chat communications are odd. So you know, whatever you're putting into the chat box, very odd. All right, gonna focus on the finish. At first, kind of baking spice note. You get that slight honey sweetness. A little bit of oak character in there. And that kind of like honey, like toasty note is kind of what takes you out of the finish, but not super long, like already gone. Not the longest. And it's not bad. It's pretty drinkable. Um, it's got some unique characters that are unique to Highland Park. But the finish, to me, at least on this at this point, is a little bit lacking. I feel like surprisingly, I found like the 12 was maybe more complex, even though this one maybe is like a little bit more intense in flavor profile. So what I'm going to do is we're going to grab by 12, and we'll do like a little bit of an AB and just see. What does it say on here for notes? Out of curiosity, what does the distillery tell us about this? Wild harmony of toasted cinnamon shards. I like toasted. I don't know about cinnamon shards. Mellow peat smoke, absolutely. Warm vanilla sponge cake. Warm vanilla sponge cake, sun-kissed lemon zest, fresh pineapple, and heather-rich honey. Yeah, I mean, I like that a little bit. That citrus thing, I think, is definitely in there. I'm a miss on fresh pineapple, though. I don't get that anywhere. Yeah, I don't think I get that absolutely anywhere. Now, that warm vanilla sponge cake, I can kind of get there, maybe. I think this, like, idea, like, this, like, toasted grain idea is maybe, like, hitting for the distillery, maybe like a little bit cakey. And that's the way I felt about the Highland 12, is that it kind of like had that little bit of a cakey, sweet, kind of like bready thing that you could call a cake. And maybe this like toasted note will evolve into being a little bit more bready as time goes on. But this didn't hit me nearly as much like fruit cake as the 12 did. So that being saying, this is a pretty well-worn 12. It's seen lots of air. It's a lower bottle. So it's not going to be like the 12 versus 15 fresh crack comparison, but it'll give us a little bit of something to think about. We're at the bitter end of this one, which I will probably replace, despite the fact that I didn't give this a glowing score. I think like this is kind of like just a staple whiskey to have around somewhat. All right, so we reacquaint ourselves with that kind of like very honey, potpourri, slightly lemony characteristics on that one. I'm gonna give that a minute. That's definitely not ready. There's a weird note. I don't know what that note is, but when I put my nose in something and I know it's not ready to be nosed, there's a note I get. It's like, oh, this is not ready yet. It's like, I don't know if it's an ethanol note or what, but it's not like a sharp note that like burns, but it's like some kind of note that's like, hey, you gotta wait a second. This is not right. It doesn't smell like this. It's like that initial vapor. It's still there somewhat. But I like the flavor. I like the uniqueness. It's very drinkable. Smooth. It's smooth. Good amount of sweetness. You could give this 15 to anybody. Honestly, you could give that to anybody. Might not be a bad. Again, this is one of the things that I sometimes I tell people, like, well, you know, I want to like do peated scotch, but I'm scared of the Islas. They're a little rough for me. Give them one of these Orkneys, man. I'm telling you. There's peat in here. You can taste the peat, but it's so mellow and nice, and soft. Um, Definitely like a toe in the river Styx. What is the taste? Which taste? Which taste? Oh, huh. So this 12 for me is a lot cakier, a lot spicier, but not in like a super spice like spicy way. Kind of like in a we just opened the spice cabinet kind of way, like spice cake. Yeah, like this 12 hits me like spice cake. And this 15 is hitting me more like citrusy. More like honey and citrus and toasted grains. Like honey and citrus and blue. Honey, citrus, and toasted grains. And this one is more like spice cake, like sweet and cakey and spicy, which would make so much sense. Again, this is the one that to me always has this fruitcake note, and that's even on the bottle, rich fruitcake. And this one doesn't have this. So maybe it's just, again, a difference between your 12 and your 15, that those grains come up more sweet and cakey somehow on this 12 year. We're going to try it on the palate here in a minute. COVID messed up my nose. Yeah, I heard that happened to a lot of people. I did have a period last year around this time where I had about 2 weeks where I couldn't taste anything. That was terrible. That was a terrible time. especially if you're trying to do like video content that has to do with you smelling and tasting whiskeys. It's pretty hard to do that when you can't smell or taste anything. It's kind of like fucked. All right, let's try this 15 again. If anything, I just want to say with this particular opportunity, this is a fresh crack 15, and this 12, I've had these for a few years. This bottle for a few years. It's low. I'm enjoying the aroma immensely. So don't let people like get really up on you. I think in my personal opinion about like, oh, this whiskey's gone bad. It's been low for too long. It's below half. It's no good anymore. Don't get too hung up on that. I promise you. Again, that mellow peat character, that kind of like honey sweetness, that little bit of toasted grain, but it's not hitting the palate cakey for me. Not like this the distillery writes warm vanilla sponge cake. That's not hitting for me right now. I'm also don't know where this pineapple is. They say fresh pineapple. That is nowhere in sight for me. Um, so we refreshed our memory on the 15. Let's go at the 12. The immediate thing I will say, my immediate notice going from the 15 to the 12 is the 15 has much more intense flavors, um, much higher concentration of flavor. Hey, look, man, gotta go to work now. All right, have a great day at work, man. Thanks for popping in. I appreciate you. The 12, again, like when we reviewed the 12, um, a little light on the palate. The flavor is a little bit thinner compared to the 15. The 15 is hitting. It's 1% higher alcohol. It's longer in the barrel. There is some plenty of different flavors on the 12, but they're just a little bit thinner. A little bit. You have to go a little bit more searching for them. It does come across a little bit more cakey and spicy for me, but again, it has a little bit of that fruitcake note, but it's not so rich on the palate compared to the 15. And that's one of the things I like to remind myself sometimes is like, you know, we have this 15 and you're like, well, hey, well, it doesn't seem that much better than the 12. But when you do this side by side comparison, you remember how much more rich and intense of the flavors you get when you upgrade the age statement. Maybe add a little bit of percent alcohol. Um, if you drink this 12 on its own, you might be like perfectly fine with the intensity of flavors. But when you make this comparison, it becomes obvious that the 15 is more rich in flavor. Um, that being said, it is slightly different in flavor. This 12 is, again, more spicier and cakier. And for me, a little bit more fruity. Again, having spent maybe less time in that sherry oak, more distillate fruits. But it's obvious, I think, when you compare them side by side, that the 15 is more intense, more rich in character. It's a little different in character, but Again, like when we reviewed the 12, I didn't give it the greatest score because to me it felt a little thin on the palate. Um, it could use a little bump up in oomph, and it's obvious when we make a comparison to a higher H2 bottle of the same range. But overall, not bad. Not bad for this 15. It's still a little light for what I would prefer. Maybe bump up the ABV a little bit to get where I would really like the flavor intensity. It's not bad, but I have to go hunting a little bit more than I would personally like. But I think with Highland Park, somewhat you're paying for the uniqueness of Highland Park. It's got some unique characters that you can't get from any other whiskey distillery. No one else is using the same kind of peat that they're using. And that imparts some very unique character that you can only get here, other than, say, an Orkney secret Orkney independent bottle or something like that, right? I think that's kind of like what you're paying for with Highland Park. It's very approachable. You can give this to anybody, despite it being peated. Um, I do enjoy it. It is tasty. It's just maybe a little bit expensive for the flavor intensity you're getting, but you're paying for that uniqueness. Um, so not bad. Not bad overall.